Producing Voiceless is definitely the most challenging experience that I've ever had in my life. I knew nothing about producing a movie prior to doing Voiceless. I knew that the Lord was calling me to do it, and I trusted that He would lead the way for me. But when you're going down a path of the unknown, where you don't know what's going to happen, you ask silly questions, and then you have to build from that knowledge and continue to learn more and more through the process.
Well, writing the film was one of the most challenging things I probably have done in my life. Did a ton of research, did a ton of preparation as it relates to studying film and studying screenwriting.
It was very difficult and almost seemed like each stage of the way was the most difficult part until you got to the next stage. And that became more difficult.
Read a ton of books and did a ton of rewrites. It was probably, I don't know, the first script we did was about 9 months to 12 months, I think it took us to write the first script. And then when people read it, they thought it was okay, they thought it was good, but the movie was just too big. We basically scrapped that and then we started over again. And I basically said, I'm gonna make a character-driven drama about one guy's passion towards this issue. And so probably took about another 6 months to a year to write that. And finally we nailed it. And I think the lead actor is in almost every scene of the movie. So we really tried to get into his head. So writing the film was I loved it, but it was angst.
So, you know, the screenplay writing and just, you know, talking with Pat, the screenplay writer, through that process seemed very difficult. But then when we got into pre-production, that seemed like the most difficult part. And then when we got into the principal photography, that was the most difficult. And then, you know, post-production was so difficult, so many issues that came up. And then the marketing of the movie, so difficult. So the most difficult experience of my life, but actually the most rewarding experience of my life, as I know that God has called me to do this. And I believe that for that reason alone, God is pleased, and this will make a difference for His kingdom.
I didn't want to shoot this movie in any other place other than Philadelphia for lots of different reasons. For one, Philadelphia is, I love Philadelphia. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, right over the Tacony-Palmyra Bridge. I spent a lot of time as a young guy there. And growing up, I've always lived within 10, 15 minutes of the city. So when people said the city, when I grew up, it was always Philly. And I remember when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, when they were filming Rocky, I was supposed to be one of the kids that was running with Rocky in that movie, but I ended up getting in trouble and my dad punished me and I wasn't able to go, but all my friends got to run. So I think ever since that day, I felt like I had to do some movie in Philadelphia to pay my dad back for doing that.
When Pat was talking with me about where we were going to film Voiceless, he was really, you know, debating between Philly and a city in New Jersey called Perth Amboy. He wanted to do it in Philly because it was a gritty, real-life kind of set for us. And Perth Amboy might have been easier because we're Jersey guys and it might have been a little closer to where we are. But he really wanted to do those locations. And so I'll never forget the very first time that Pat and our line producer, Roy, took me to Philly. And they showed me where it is that they wanted to film the majority of the movie. And there was an L train going by the set that they wanted to film it on every minute and a half. And I was like, this is impossible. How are we going to film this movie, Voiceless, with an L train ramming through the set every minute and a half?
The character of Philadelphia, the grit of Philadelphia, the fact that Rocky is a fighting movie about an underdog who takes a stand and goes out and follows and goes after something that nobody thought he was going to be able to do, all was a part of why we wanted to shoot this movie there.
And I remember Pat's reaction right away. Pat's like, oh, Stu, don't worry about it. It'll be no problem. And I'm thinking, this is impossible. Why doesn't Pat see it? And then I asked the line producer, Roy, you know, Roy, what do you think? Are we going to be able to do this? Stu, don't worry. We got it all taken care of. We'll make it work. I never thought it would work.
I'll never forget when I was studying film and reading screenplays, and I was reading Rocky. One of the first lines in Rocky and how they describe the place that Rocky was boxing was that it was the inside of a dirty garbage can. And I just said, that's how I want to describe Voiceless, because I wanted the whole entire movie to be a reflection of our main character.
And then when I met the sound guy, Aaron, I trailed Aaron for the first 5 days of the shoot, obnoxiously asking him over and over again, are you sure you're going to be able to get rid of that train sound? Are you sure you're going to be able to get the sound? Is that going to be affecting you? Is this going to be affecting you? Nobody else on the set was concerned about it except for me.
I wanted the whole entire movie to have a dark, gritty type of feel to it, which is what our main character was sort of going through, and really, in my opinion, what abortion is as well. It's a very dark subject, very gritty, very nasty thing to think about. So Philadelphia, to me, was the only place that we could shoot this.
But you know what? It worked out great. Pat was right. It really brought this film to life. It's actually a character in the movie, the L Train, and the whole setting is perfect.
They actually tried to get us to shoot in other cities, and if you look around throughout the country, you will not find any city like Philadelphia, nor will you find a city of Philadelphia where the people are who they are. Philadelphia has its own language, it has its own style, and it's really a unique city. I'm glad to have filmed there. Plus, the tax credits are great.
When we were getting ready for the production of Voiceless, Pat and I talked about it, and we said, you know what, we've just got to pull the plug. We've just got to do this. We had debated back and forth about using a crew from another state and about how we would find a crew and how would we interview people and how to get this thing going. And finally, one day, we just looked at one another and we said, it's time. It's time and we have to do this.
My mantra was to surround myself with people that really knew what they were doing, people that were great at what they did. And I knew that I needed a great director of photography, I needed a great assistant director, a great production designer, great producer, somebody that can organize behind the scenes. And if I could stay focused on communicating the vision of the film to the actors, and then personally working with them and trying to get the best out of them, then I knew that we would be okay, and that's what we tried to do.
So we posted some ads out there in the medium where we would find people that would be interested in this, and we just started interviewing people. And it was interesting because the first position we were interviewing for was line producer. And we had interviewed some people that were, very interesting and very different than what we expected them to be like. And not only that, people that were very strange. And then we had interviewed some people that really could have done a very good job as well. And then we interviewed our line producer, Roy. And you just knew from the beginning that he was the guy that we wanted to hire. He had this attitude as if making a movie was like going into a war. And no matter what happened, you would win that battle and get it done. And I remember when Roy said that to me in the interview process, like, this is our guy, this is our guy. And then as soon as he left, I said to Pat, I said, you know what, buddy, I like this guy. This guy knows what it means to make a movie, and I believe he'll do anything at any cost to make it happen. And then, Roy had brought in a whole bunch of other people for us to interview, but most importantly, our director of photography, our DP, because that's a critical role. And Roy had us talking to a bunch of different people, and then he introduced us to Joe. And Joe just did a great job in the interview process. And once again, you had that feeling that you knew it was right. And at the end of the day, we knew it was the Lord who brought these people into our life.
So for me, the biggest obstacle was that I didn't have a lot of experience, so I didn't know really what to expect. I had done some documentaries, but I didn't really know how everything was going to come together. So what I did was I actually storyboarded the whole entire film. I think it was Storyboard Artist or something, some kind of low-level storyboard, or at least I got the low-level version of it, and where every character's face looks exactly the same. We just changed their hair color and their shirts. And so I did that. I put that together, and I just said, you know what? I'm going to take it step by step by step to be able to overcome this. And then we did an animatic, and we put dialogue in there. So my biggest obstacle was inexperience, but I overcame that by just through preparation and getting everybody on the same page and getting the best people to work with as well.
The production process was something that really, unnerved me a few days before we began production. I mean, leading up to that point, it was just a challenge and it was difficult, but I became unnerved in one especially difficult situation where like 2 days before beginning to film Voiceless, and our first day of filming takes place at a funeral home. And so I just decided to go into the funeral home and look around and see what it looked like because I hadn't seen that location yet. I walk in and the woman who works at the funeral home, her father is the owner, she greets us and she introduces herself and we had a nice time, a nice chat. We were talking, we were looking over this little funeral home. And then she says to me, I just want to work out the terms of our agreement here, how much we're going to pay them for this location. Now, that had been worked out by our line producer, I thought, weeks before. Anyway, after dialogue back and forth, I realized that she was asking for way more money than we would ever pay for this location. And at the end of the day, I just had to walk out and tell her, you know what, we're going to have to find another location. And that unnerved me. I thought, if that happened for the first scene, how much more is that going to happen throughout the whole production?
Production for me was great. It was like it was game time every day. But I'm a very impatient person, and so having I had a lot of anxiety during production in the very beginning because I just wanted it was like 3 years that we were working on this movie, so I wanted to get it done, but I wanted to make sure that we did it in the best possible way that we could. So obstacle-wise for me, from a production perspective, there wasn't any major obstacles because we had so much preparation done in the film, and we took such great care in casting. We took such great care in picking our crew, and we made sure that the leaders of our movie that we gelled together. There really wasn't any obstacles. We knew every day that we were going to get it done.
But you know what? Our line producer understood that that was an issue and a problem. And I said, what are you going to do, Roy? We got to do something here. And he said, I will knock on every door of every funeral parlor within 5 miles of this location, and I'll find you one. And he did. He found one that was about 10 times bigger than this one, that staffed us with extras, and it just worked out perfectly. It was a much better location. But we had issues like that throughout the process. And so, you know what? It was a bit like going into a war. And there were obstacles and difficulties that we had to overcome. And having a good team behind us made it, I think, much easier.
I mean, there was some dynamic tension on the set, especially with our first AD, Brandon, who was a great first AD, very disciplined. But I had to get used to me coming on set and then saying, okay, we're getting 50 shots today, and he's like, no, we only have time for 30. So that was a little stressful. And then I would just get Joe to talk him into, let him know the reality is that we're getting all the shots. So, but anyway, there wasn't really any major obstacles because of the preparation.
Being on set when we were doing Voiceless was a really neat experience for me. I mean, you've got the monitors where you can see the actors behind the scenes playing out their roles, and then you've got the cameraman and the DP and the director and, the whole, cut and, let's show that scene again. And you know what? That was really exciting for me in the beginning of the process. But you know what? That actually got a little bit old for me after maybe about a week or so, because there are so many times that you have to redo a scene over and over and over again.
The directing of the movie is something I felt that I've been created to do. I just love directing. It's my whole entire life from when I was younger, being in the sales world, being in the marketing world, being in just working with people and motivating people.
And so in the beginning, I wanted to be on set every day. I wanted to see every scene. And as a producer, you don't necessarily have to do that, but that's what I wanted to do. But as time went on, I knew I can leave it all up to the director, Pat, who did a great job with the directing of the movie. And so I basically, stayed behind the scenes for a lot of the times. And then just some of my favorite scenes, I'd get out into the set and see what was going on. Finding our lead actor, Jesse Dean, was our #1 priority and the biggest challenge of this movie. Pat had looked at so many different actors, and he had sent me videos of all different actors, and we were prioritizing, well, this is #1, and this is #2, and this one's #3, but we really don't have exactly what we're looking for, and we're getting closer and closer to the shoot. And we really don't have our Jesse Dean yet.
So Rusty Joyner was somebody that I had seen in other films, and just, you know, he had the look, that exact look that I was looking for Jesse Dean. But I honestly didn't think we were going to be able to get him, because you would be surprised that even though I believe we handled the pro-life message and the pro-life element of this film in a decent way, that even if you're not pro-life and you watch this movie, you shouldn't get that offended from it. But you would be surprised on how many actors, especially lead-level actors, read the script and said, oh, you know, oh, I love this. Oh, no, I don't want to do it, because of just the element of that pro-life element in it. And so I didn't think we were going to get Rusty.
And so one Sunday morning, I'm taking a walk in the park, and I get a call on a Sunday from Pat. And Pat calls me and says, hey, Stu, we've got this one other actor, Rusty Joyner, who's supposed to send in a video. We were supposed to have it on Friday, an audition video. We don't have it, so let's just go with, and he had mentioned this one actor that we should go with. And I said, you know what, Pat, why don't we wait till tomorrow? Tomorrow's Monday, today's a Sunday, no one's doing anything on a Sunday. Let me not call him today. I'm gonna call him tomorrow. And then you think about it. And Pat said, I'm sure of this, we're hiring this guy, call him today. So right there in the park, I picked up the phone, I called this actor, and he was so excited. He's a new actor. He's been in a few features, but this is a big role for him. He's got a lead in a great movie, and he was so excited about it. And he said, you know, I'll get you in touch with my agent, and we'll work out the contractual details, but this is wonderful. And so we had our lead actor.
But then I'll never forget, it was like a Sunday night, and I get this email from Rusty's agent, and his audition was phenomenal. And me and my wife were sitting there like, oh my, we already casted this other guy. And my wife's like, you better call Stuart up right now and tell him that this is the guy that you're getting for that role.
Pat says, Stu, I just got in the audition video for Rusty, and he is Jesse Dean. I said, Pat, it's too late. We already hired on Jesse Dean 4 hours ago. I told you we had to, wait. We should have waited until Monday, but you wanted to do it today. So I called him, and we're locked in. And then Pat said, we don't have a contract yet. And so we can make a change. Just watch his video. And I hear Pat's wife in the background, Natalie, and she's saying, this is crazy. Does he understand? This is a great Jesse Dean. He's perfect. He's perfect. And so my wife and I are sitting there. We said, okay, send it over. We watched the video, and Pat was right. He was great for the role. And so I had an interview with Rusty the next day on the phone, and he just met all of our qualifications perfectly. And then the hardest thing that I did on the whole set of Voiceless was to call this other actor and tell him that we made a different choice. And you know what? It was so interesting because I stressed about it. I waited until we worked out the contract with Rusty, so it was about 4 or 5 days later. And I called him up, and he said, you know what, buddy? We did not sign a contract, and this is customary. In Hollywood, these things happen. I'm disappointed, but I understand why you had to go a different way. And so it all worked out just so perfectly, but getting Rusty was really a cool addition to this cast.
And we had Jocelyn Cruz, who I believe was perfect for Julia. So I had Jocelyn's audition and I had Rusty's audition for the same scene, and I cut it together just on my computer real quick, and I sent it out. I was just trying to build a case. I'm like, look how great these guys are. Great chemistry, great look. And so we ended up casting them both, and it was one of the best things that we ever did.
You know, I play Dr. Epstein in Voiceless. And, I remember that when we had the schedule of the scenes, Dr. Epstein's scene was going to be filled about midway through the production. So maybe like 13 or 14 days into the production. And I didn't really think much about that, other than to think that, I can see how everything's working and I can get myself involved at that point of the production in an easier way into an acting role. And then about 3 or 4 days before we filmed Voiceless, Pat came to me and said, hey, Stu, we changed the schedule of the production, and actually the Epstein scene is going to be the very first scene we film. I said, the very first scene in the movie? He said, yeah, you're going to be the first scene in the movie. And I have to tell you, I had some jitterbugs as a result of that. It was something that I didn't expect, but actually, in retrospect, it worked out so well. I mean, I left my house at 5:30 a.m. that morning, got into the set at around 7:30, and before I knew it, I was mic'd up and ready to roll, and we spent probably about 4 or 5 hours to film my scene. And then when that was done, I was able to put my producer hat on for the rest of the shoot. For the next 25 days, it was just about being a producer, not an actor. So it worked out perfect. The Lord really worked it out great.
The casting of this film to me was one of the most exciting things to do. I knew exactly I knew the exact type of people I wanted to play each character. I had some connections through our line producer, Roy, with some of the top actors in Philadelphia who he made some connections there. But really it was Michael Lemon casting, Melanie Forchetti, who was critical in this. And we just buckled down and we just reached out to every single person that we thought was a good actor in Philadelphia. I think we did over 200 auditions for all the characters other than the pastor, who was played by James Russo, Julia, who was played by Jocelyn Cruz, and Rusty Joyner, who played Jesse. Other than that, I think we pulled everybody from Philadelphia. Oh, Taylor Coleman from Chicago as well. Who else?
Paul.
Oh, and Paul Rodriguez, who also came from California. But it's funny because after the auditions, after we went through every single one of these auditions, I picked out, myself and Roy and Melanie, we looked at every one of these actors and we said, these are the people that we knew we wanted from Philadelphia. Like Susan Moses for Miss Elsie. Knew I wanted her.
Don't you know Proverbs? It means you got to take a stand. Otherwise it stinks worse than crap. You know crap?
Yes, ma'am. So my wife tells me that you're one of the original members of the church, but I haven't seen you there yet.
I haven't been interested in coming.
Great. And why did you want to risk the entire success of the film by acting in it?
You know, I have to tell you, acting in Voiceless, it's such a blessing for me to have been able to do that. You know, when I was 30 years old, before I was a believer, I actually went to the School of Acting, the Lee Strasberg School of Acting. I all of a sudden decided out of nowhere that I wanted to be an actor. And I took acting lessons for about 6 months. And then I, came to my senses and realized that it wasn't appropriate for me to be doing that. A dad of 2 children, a husband trying to support his family. And so I gave up that dream. And then when Pat and I started talking about making a movie, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great for me to take some of the things that I've learned and use it in a way that would really make a difference for God. And so I have to tell you, the acting part for me was the most fun part. It really was. I enjoyed playing Dr. Epstein in this movie, and I'm so blessed that I was able to have that opportunity. It says here that you work at a church now.
That's right.
So an Army Ranger who's now running an outreach at a church in the city. How's that going?
It's fine.
And for your wife, a film makeup artist?
She's a hairstylist.
So one of the biggest dilemmas for me in terms of casting was the character of Travis and Alexis. And Travis and Alexis are the people that are in the abortion clinic scene where this guy takes his girlfriend into the clinic and Jesse tries to stop them from going in. And the boyfriend is very demanding for this. He's saying, get out of here or whatever, however the scene goes. And so I really, didn't want to stereotype that role. And I'll never forget Ken McGregor, who is really, in my opinion, an acting legend in Philadelphia, and is really a phenomenal actor, has been in dozens and dozens of films, and also runs a very successful acting school in Philadelphia. He comes and auditions for Pastor Gill. And if you know Ken, he's just a trip. He's hysterical, and he just pretty much took command of the whole audition, and pretty much told me, that I'm going to cast him one way or the other. And there was no way he was going to get Pastor Gill, because I wanted James Russo for Pastor Gill from the very beginning, and I knew that's who I was going to get. And it took me a while to have to convince everybody to pay the money that he wanted, but we did it. But so Ken, in the middle of his audition, this is the type of guy that he is. He stops the audition and says, wait a minute, you got to see somebody. And I'm like, you're doing your audition. And he stops the audition. He says, come with me. And he grabs my hand. He pulls me out of the audition room. We walk down this long hallway, and in the waiting room is Victoria Gates. Now, Victoria is like, she looks like a Barbie doll. She's got this blonde hair, real attractive girl. He goes, this girl you have to put in your movie. You got to put her in your movie somewhere. She wasn't on the list. So I said, no problem. I brought her in, and she's phenomenal. She does a great job. I had her read for like 3 different parts. So I didn't know where I was going to use her, but I knew I had 1 or 2 different parts that I knew for sure I wanted to use her in. And then that night I said, you know, because Travis and Alexis were supposed to be like this, like Travis was supposed to be like a gang member from Philadelphia, and Alexis was supposed to be like some, like almost like a street girl. And I said, how cool would it be if we had these 2 play that role? Because apparently I found out that they're together in real life. And I said, well, what if she was pregnant by somebody else, and our lead guy thinks that this guy is her father when he's really her boyfriend? And that was a touchy subject because Ken is a little bit older than Victoria, so I had to ask his permission, and he was totally cool with that. And so anyway, that really worked out cool because I think that was one of the best dynamics in the whole film. It was something that we really needed. It was a twist, and it was a motivation for somebody to really have to pull out a gun. So it helped justify our shooting scene as well. So that really worked out.
The Dr. Epstein role was a role that I really enjoyed playing. I do a lot of counseling in my life with people on a variety of different issues, and Dr. Epstein is really counseling our lead actor, Jesse Dean, in this movie. So it was more about, you know, some of the things that I've done in my life, and so I enjoyed that very much. But the preparation was intense. I mean, I went ahead and became Dr. Epstein for months. My wife would say, are you Dr. Epstein now? After we'd been talking for about 15 minutes, and I said, yeah, I'm Dr. Epstein, so let's keep going. We would rehearse my lines over and over and over again, and then I made a backstory of Dr. Epstein, and I knew what he was doing an hour before that scene. I knew what he was doing 2 weeks before that scene. I knew what he was doing 2 years before that scene. I knew what he was doing when he first married his wife 35 years earlier. I mean, I really created a whole character, Dr. Epstein. And you know, really I'm on the screen for, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes, I think, something like that. But I spent months and months preparing for this role, giving it all I had, and even in that preparation, it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Susan Moses, when I saw Susan Moses, I said, you are going to, she was like the first or second person I auditioned for Miss Elsie, and I said, you are her. And immediately casted her and got her some Gaelic, Scottish accent lessons, and she just did an absolutely phenomenal job.
Pat wrote in my Dr. Epstein scene a scenario where I had to ask Jesse on a scale of 1 to 10 how he thought about something. And so when I read that part in the screenplay, I was like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I do in almost everything I do. So I've got to get an idea from you. How do you feel about your wife? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being great, you know, 1 being not so good, how do you feel about your wife? So I ask that question all the time, and so I asked it of the line producer, I asked it of the director of photography, and you know what? I asked it of Jesse Dean as well.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say your time away has affected your marriage? 10 being bad and 1 being not at all.
We picked up right where we left off. It's like I never left.
So would you say a 3 or a 4?
A 1.
And he asked it of me for the past 20 years. That's why I wrote it.
Yeah.
We had the scene, and we got through editing. We edited the movie, and I'm like, Stu, we got to chop this down, you know, because he had 2 full scenes. So the second scene we had to put like in a montage at the end. We couldn't have it. And so he took it so hard, you know, and then we had to cut the first scene down. I only took like 4 seconds off the first scene, and he freaked out. He's like, you took that look, that one look. Didn't you see the way I looked? I looked, and you cut that out. That look was great. Why'd you take that out? So that's what I had to deal with, but it was all worth it. And now the next movie, he's already starting. Now look, I'm going to play a bigger role in the next movie. So now I'm trying to figure out how to create this next story that we have, and I have to fit him in there somewhere. So
We'll just say that David/Stuart did a terrific job. He nailed every take. It was good to watch you work, man.
When Pat and I were talking about the role of Virgil Adorable, you know, Pat had said from the beginning we needed somebody who had a comedic quality, someone who can bring some levity to this movie. I mean, this is a serious movie. This is an intense movie. It's a gritty movie, and we needed someone who could play that role and play it in a way to bring some comic relief to the movie.
I need to make sure my proper paperwork.
I was voiceless for a minute.
And so we talked about different characters and who they'd be, and Paul Rodriguez always came up in our discussion. We've got to get Paul Rodriguez. Now, he has done movies in the past. He's even done some television shows, and he's a working comedian, and I didn't think it was going to be possible to get Paul. But I contacted his agent, we worked back and forth, and what we did was we worked out something that's very interesting. We said we're going to shoot his scenes all in one day. So Paul was going to fly in. We were going to start shooting early in the morning. We were going to shoot actually to the next morning, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then he could leave the set, and in that way we could afford to hire him, and we can have his comedic relief.
Yeah, well, we're real happy to have this man on set. Did a great job today. You're going to see some great things on camera with Voiceless and Mr. Virgil Adorable, played by Paul Rodriguez.
And I am adorable. My mother said that.
All right.
And so when he showed up, he was a quiet and kind of reserved guy off set. But as soon as the cameras got on him, he was great. He was ad-libbing, improvising, you know, just making everybody laugh actually behind the scenes of what we were doing. And then when the cameras stopped rolling, you know, I gotta tell you, really a genuine guy. He and I spent some time together just talking about things, even talking about the Lord, talking about the movie and the purpose of it and what we wanted to accomplish with it. And it was a very interesting, you know, sort of way for me to get to know Paul. But he brings the perfect comedic relief to this movie, and he did a great job.
Yeah, so Jeremiah DeMoss, who played Danny, is probably one of the most persistent actors that I've ever met. Because when we originally were going to shoot Voiceless like 3 years before we actually did, Jeremiah auditioned for Danny, and he really didn't do a great job. I mean, he had some talent, he had a good look for him, but I wasn't real impressed with him, and he was a little rough around the edges and was just showing me push-ups in his audition and chin-ups and how he can fight and all that. So, but the guy is the most persistent. He literally followed up with me for that role for 3 years. And after 3 years, after him getting this experience, I guess he got more experience. He must have took acting lessons or something like that. He really nailed the audition, and I just said, "This is Danny." And I actually brought him in, and it came down between him and another guy, and we matched them up with all these 2 other girls for Gigi, and I just knew it was him.
And so we hired Jeremiah, but Jeremiah hadn't really done much acting before this. And so, you know, Jeremiah had some issues and some difficulties in making sure that he worked out his work situation and that he worked out his, you know, his financial situation to be able to take this movie. And I'll never forget, he comes to me and he says, "Look, you know what? I need an advance. I need some money to be able to get some housing for me during the you know, month that we're shooting this movie." And so I lent Jeremiah some money, and I said, "Jeremiah, look, send me a text and tell me that you're going to pay me back this movie, you know, before the end of the shoot is over." And so I would tease him throughout the movie, and we would talk about it a little bit. And then on the last day of the shoot, he came in with the money and he gave it to me. And just a really honorable, you know, guy who's out there now in Hollywood trying to make a name for himself, and he did a great job. And here's what this story tells us. You know what? Don't give up. Just keep trying, you know. And here he is. He tried for 2 years. And then he earned himself the role of Danny, and he did a great job.
Taylor Coleman did phenomenal. She had the exact look and attitude that I wanted for Gigi. And she did a great job. Well, I actually had to do an audition for her through Skype, which I still have on my cell phone today. It was really fun. Me and Melanie just Skyped her in. She did a great job, and it was a done deal.
Danny said you saw us coming out of the clinic. I'm scheduled this Friday. I'm at 23 weeks, so I have to decide now. My mom's telling me to get rid of it.
It's not an it, Gigi. Your baby is a real life. Whatever you do, don't go through with this.
Let's go.
Oh, chill out.
With Brian Wilson, Brian is one of those guys that when you see him on camera, he just takes command of whatever scene that he's in. He is phenomenal. I wanted him for this film one way or the other, and I was actually mad at Roy, who said that he was going to get me Brian Wilson to come and audition for a role. I didn't know where we wanted to put him, and he never did. And I know he was trying to get a hold of him or whatever. And I was sitting in the doing auditions, and it was between actors coming in, and I had said to Melanie, I said, Melanie, did Roy ever get a hold of you about Brian Wilson? And she said, no, he never did. I said, I really want to get this actor, Brian Wilson. She goes, of course, everybody knows him in Philly. I said, I'd really like to have him come in. And as soon as I said that, like right at the last word, Brian opens the door to the audition. And I looked at him and I said, how did you know that we were doing this? He goes, what are you talking about? I just heard there was a movie being shot, and I told my agent I want to come down and audition. I said, get in here. And it was hysterical. That's such a coincidence that this guy walked in right as I was saying that. And we didn't know where we were going to put him, but he was perfect for Will Taylor, did a phenomenal job.
So here we are, the Epstein scene is done, and day one is done, so that stress of acting is away from me. And so here we're in this park on the second day, shooting the street preacher scene, and you know, it's a beautiful day, the weather's nice, everything is going well, and so Miss Elsie, you know, our Scottish woman character, is doing her first scene. And she's filming her first scene. It's not the first scene of the movie, but it's her first scene that we're filming. And so we're getting some shots of her far away, and I'm loving it. I think it looks great, and I'm having a great day. And our director says to me, Stu, I don't like Miss Elsie's hair.
And I just looked at that and I said, we cannot commit to this for the whole movie.
So I said, Pat, her hair looks fine. Don't worry about her hair. No, I don't like her hair. And so he would snap pictures of her hair and he'd text it to me and he'd say, look at her hair. He'd text it to other people as well. She doesn't look real. Something's wrong with the way that her hair looks. And I said, Pat, listen, we're going to have to go with this because we can't reshoot this whole day. We had already shot her scene, and it's too expensive for us to reshoot the whole day.
That was the very beginning of the movie, and it was the first scene you ever saw Miss Elsie in the movie. So it sort of worked. So I'm like, she's out shopping, so she's a little dolled up, you know. And then if you notice, every scene after that, she's always in some sort of pajamas or she's in some sort of outfit where it looks like she's kind of walking around the house, or her hair.
So Pat did a great job. I mean, it was a little crazy, but he took our hairstylist and he joined her up with Miss Elsie, and we paid Miss Elsie extra to spend the next 3 days going to wig shops and makeup places and all kinds of different places to try to find out where her hair could be done the best.
And we said, her wig, he said, no, she doesn't, let's do it again. So here we are.
So how, what, the third time maybe?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we've been putting her through the ringer.
And she did such a phenomenal job acting in it. We, you know, to have to live with that Mrs. Doubtfire hair would have been really bad.
And after about 3 days, she walks back in and we used her natural hair. We didn't have to use a wig. She looked great and he really meshed it all together perfectly. But you know what? What's interesting about that? It's the detail. You know, the art of a movie is in the details of the movie. And so even paying attention to Miss Elsie's hair makes a difference at the end of the day with this movie. And that's the kind of detail that Pat used throughout the movie. And I believe that God is pleased when we look for the art in the details of everything that we do, actually.
And if we wait long enough, my own hair will come in white, so we won't have anything to worry about.
Anything to worry about.
Yeah, the crossing of the street scene, I really, that scene at the end of the movie where the whole entire church culminates to one section of the street and then crosses the street was a really big challenge for us. For one, we had to close the street down. And that's Frankfurt Avenue in Philadelphia. And it's one of the busiest streets in Northeast. So having to shut that street down people weren't exactly excited about that in the neighborhood. But really, logistically for me, it was difficult because we had about 100 extras that we had to gather together for that shot. And I really have to thank Brandon and Joe for that because they really sort of coordinated how we were going to get everybody, the groups of people. As if you see that scene, you have different groups of people coming in, and then everybody sort of ends up right at the center. And that seems like, oh, that's simple, just have everybody there. But it's not that simple because unless it looks seamless and unless you have the continuity that's required for something like that, it can look like just a bunch of, fragmented scenes. but it actually worked. And I have to say that our editor, John Vasquez, did a phenomenal job with that scene and just like mashed it together. And then there was like the question, all right, well, what are we gonna do after they cross the street? Are they gonna have like a gang fight with the pro-choicers? You know, we had to figure out what we were gonna do with that too. But I loved getting that scene together because I got to rally for the first time in my life. I got to rally pro-choicers. I mean, a pro-life guy can't say that.
Stand up! Fight back! 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 Stand up!
It was funny because there was people that on our set that had pro-choice stickers, and there were people on our set that had pro-life stickers, and there were people on our set, I'm talking about our crew, that had pro-life and pro-choice. They were like in the middle, and it sort of, kind of in a weird way, brought everybody together.
So our movie opens up with a view of the train, the L train, coming right into Kensington, the section of Philly that we filmed the movie in. And it's raining that day. And it was important because it wasn't raining that day, but it was important that we had rain because Pat wanted to make sure that we had rain in that opening scene and then we can catch the L train coming in. And so we looked at our budget and we realized we didn't have any money really allocated for this because that shot, that L train shot, believe it or not, that's a $10,000 shot just for that L train to come in. You've got to get a special piece of equipment, you've got to watch it very carefully, and it's got to time it perfectly. The train's got to be coming in at a certain angle. The machine has to be up so high, and it's a real crazy kind of a thing to do. And not only that, there's a machine that makes the rain, so that has to work at the same time as well. And not only that, you've got to shut down the street. So you have to hire Philadelphia police officers on one side of the street, on the other side of the street, and so it's a very expensive process. So we go ahead and we shoot this scene, and everything went wrong. I mean, the scene was just not working. We couldn't get the rain machine to work, and the actual machine that shot the train coming in, that wasn't working right. And actually, at one point, it crashed a little bit, and I said, "Oh no, we're gonna break this camera," and so it just didn't work. And I said to Pat, "You know what, buddy? We're just not going to get that opening scene the way that you want to get it. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to get it." And Pat said, "Stu, you don't understand. We have got to make that L train come through in the beginning of this movie, and we've got to have the rain."
And for me, the train is really a very significant character in the film. It's the dividing line between the church and the clinic. It's like this big, giant, like crab machine in the middle of this road that's always rumbling in the background. And it's just so, it just so belonged in this movie. And so I wanted to start the movie with that.
We went back and forth, Pat and I, about it. And we said, let's go ahead and spend the money again. And we went ahead and spent the money again, and we brought everybody else in. And I remember that the last time, the police said, we have to stop. The police said, look, the first time we did this, we're hired for a certain amount of hours, and we've got to leave at that time, and we can't continue. And that was one of the reasons why we didn't get the shot the first time. And so this time, I went over to the police officers and I made friends with them, and I explained to them the importance of this scene, and I brought them some dinner, and I went back and forth, one end of the street to the other end of the street, and they were so nice. They really were so cooperative, and we just had to explain to them the importance of the scene, and they let us get that scene. And so actually, that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie for that very reason alone.
That scene was a real expensive scene. It was really hard to get, and to set up the rain, it's just a big pain, but like on the second take, we didn't see it, but him and Jocelyn are in the truck, and I guess they're getting changed because when they come out of the truck, they're dressed in Phillies outfits.
I thought you said this is the Philly Stadium.
I thought that's what it was. Did you get tickets?
Did you get... Anybody need 2 tickets? Anybody? All right, let's go, come on.
And they have like a Phillies umbrella. They're like, is this the stadium?
You gotta show off your moves.
She could come out with it.
Look like this when you live here. Look like this. Did it look like this when you used to live here?
Hi guys.
Like this. Oh yes, oh dear. And it.
So What's with all the behind-the-scene interviews that you did with the cast and crew?
Great role, Gigi and Danny. You guys are gonna love this. But so tell me, and you've done that in your life, haven't you? Tell us about the children that you have.
Well, excuse me.
Taylor Coleman playing Gigi. She's getting ready here in the holding area. You see this area? Where they're waiting to go on the camera. And Gene just really nailed it, did a great job. You're gonna see him on film pretty soon on the big screen. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you very much. Okay, perfect. So this is Lely, and she is playing...
Hold on 1 second, speak a little bit louder, start from the beginning.
So, I laugh every time I think about this because, so when we're, getting ready to film, Pat says to me, just sort of flippantly, he says, Stu, you're going to be in charge of the behind-the-scenes thing. You brought this guy Penn onto the set. Penn was really responsible for the behind-the-scenes and to do a few other things as well. He's an intern. He said, so you brought Penn on, so why don't you just lead the behind-the-scenes thing?
Vince DiCaro, who is with CareNet, and Roland Warren, who is with CareNet.
Absolutely.
So what are you guys thinking about all of this? You've been here for the day. What's your thoughts? What's going on?
And I said, well, do you have any advice to give me? Nah, don't worry about it. Just lead the behind-the-scenes thing. So I didn't know what to do.
Stu, hold on 1 second. Can you just introduce them one more time?
Okay.
Just so we can get the...
Wait just a minute. So we have Vince DiCaro, and Vince is with CareNet. What's your title?
I am the Chief Outreach Officer of CareNet.
I gotta tell you, I didn't know what to do. So, there's, the first scene when I was done filming, the very first scene with Jesse, I brought him over and I said, hi, I put my arm around him. I'm like, hey, this is Stuart Migdon and I've got Jesse Dean here, but it's really Rusty Joyner.
So thank you both so much. I'm so blessed to be involved and here today. I thank you very much. And we will see you in the movies.
All right, blessings. Great. One more thing. Can I just get a couple words from you? I think we might have missed like the first couple, just a couple words from the beginning.
Which words?
Which words?
If you can just
ask him about the movie.
Yeah, just ask him just a little bit.
Yeah, so
like a minute or even less. Yes.
And so I would ask them silly questions, and I would do that because I didn't know that any other behind-the-scenes videos were taking place. So every time there was a scene done, I'd grab the actor over and I'd do these corny interviews. And so it was a real blessing for me to learn at the end of the movie that Pat said to me, Stuart, those interviews that you did, I mean, they were really crazy interviews, but don't worry, we got hours of behind-the-scenes footage otherwise. I said, oh my goodness, I didn't even know we got any other behind-the-scenes footage. So, some of the things that you see me with these interviews, you could have seen a lot worse, and maybe one day we'll release some of those other ones and you'll see what I'm talking about.
So here we are on set with Jocelyn Cruz. Jocelyn, you are playing who?
Julia!
Julia, and we're having our lunch break, which is really a dinner break, right? It's 5 o'clock. And anyway, I drink and ferment my own goat's milk. I take raw goat's milk and I ferment it with kefir grains. And so everyone who's tried it hasn't liked it. No one's ever liked it. Mr. Jesse Dean over there has tried it. And he was okay with it, but he wasn't going to drink it. This guy over here, he's a director who's never been on the camera yet, and he's still shaking his head no. Well, anyway, he won't even consider it. But now Jocelyn is going to give it a taste.
All right, cheers. It tastes like goat cheese, but it's also kind of sour.
That's exactly what it tastes like.
But
it tastes like
it's
goat's
kind of
cheese,
tasty.
but it's sour. That's exactly right. Yeah? She went for
kind of like it. I finished it.
When it was getting time for us to get to the end and film our last day of production, I started to get some mixed emotions about that. On the one hand, I wanted it to be done because I wanted to get it into the editing room and ultimately get it out into theaters and into DVD release as well.
One of the coolest things about being on set too was one of my favorite things to do in life is to eat Philly pretzels. And I have to thank Roy that I remember one day, I think it was the last day of shooting, that he brought a whole entire box of Philly pretzels.
But on the other hand, it was a bit sad for me because I'd made some great friends on the set. I'd found a real, neat niche for me. It was a purposeful kind of a way for me to live my life, and I enjoyed the whole thing. So the last day was a bit, difficult for me in the beginning. But what was so cool at the end of it? I mean, here I am looking at Pat, And we had 5 years earlier, or at that point, I think it was 3 years early. 3 years early at that point, we decided to make this movie. So I'm looking at Pat. 3 years earlier, we decided we were going to do a movie, and now we're done.
I love you, bro. I made a friend for life, and I know everybody here can say the same thing. Picture wrap for Rusty.
And so I looked at him and we hugged, and that moment was a moment that I'll never forget. It was just a really cool thing to know that we had trusted the Lord, we had worked for 3 solid years to get this done, and now we had a movie in the can, so to speak, and now the fun was going to begin with the editing and ultimately the marketing of this. So there were mixed emotions on the last day, but the cool thing was that we got the job done.
And I think I ate like 10 that day. It was great. But I remember Brandon saying, you know, picture wrap for Voiceless, and it was the one thing I thought of after all of this. I have to tell you, I looked around at the set when he said, you know, can we wrap, Pat? And he said, there's a wrap for Voiceless. And I just looked and I said, I wonder if Joe is going to expect me to stay, because it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, to have to clean up all of this gigantic mess. The whole entire street was filled with all of grip equipment and all this stuff. And I just left and I said, man, this is such a blessing to have to be able to leave this movie and to get this in picture wrap and not have to clean everything up. It was phenomenal. It was great.
You're so lonely.
Hello! We're about to wrap our final day instead of Voiceless, day 26. It's been so fun. We're shooting the last shot, which is actually the first shot of the movie, so, you know, hopefully it goes well. TTYL!
But yeah, Voiceless has touched people's lives. You know, see, the one reason we did Voiceless was to get people to take a stand, to take action. We don't want people to pray more, although that's good. We don't want people to go to church more, although that's good too. We want people to go out and confront the culture for the Lord, take a stand for the Lord in society against evil. Because if you look about evil on the other side, they're always proclaiming evil. But we wanted to get people to do it. And since the theatrical release, we've been flooded with stories and emails and women standing up and confessing and people starting ministry.
But the end result is a piece of art, a work that will go you know, and survive for years and years and years to come and make a difference for what your heart really wants to make a difference for. So how you're being led to make a difference, film is a great way to put that on the big screen, and people are influenced by what they see on the big screen. And so, you know, I'm so blessed that we were able to do this, and actually, as I sit here filming this behind-the-scene video for you folks, I'm getting ready to go with Pat to explore our next movie and look at what we're gonna do, and I'm excited to introduce that to you folks at some point, and it's gonna be such a great, true story that's gonna make a difference for the things of God.
Joe, call it? Pat,
Yes.
can I call it?
What do you think, Joe? Good? Yeah?
Call it. That is a picture wrap on Voiceless, everyone! Yeah!
Let's do it one more time! One more time!
I gotta get everyone off the street.
Good, man. Yeah. Congrats, baby.
Great, man. Dream come true.
Congratulations. Yeah, thanks.